Hey. Okay, so we've come to the part in this unit about plants. And so you're probably a lot more familiar with plants than you are protists or fungi. So go ahead and get out those notes. Make sure you're taking additional notes and writing down what I say or highlighting. Okay, so plants came about a long time ago. Your notes say 50 million years, and probably because to avoid competition with the ocean, with the animals in the ocean, so they wanted to get out of that. Algae came before plants, and remember me telling you that algae are just like plants. They want to be plants. They do photosynthesis. They have a cell wall made of cellulose. Write that at the top for me. Cell wall made of cellulose. Let me write that word for you. Cell wall made of cellulose. That's what the cell wall is made out of. And so algae are just like that, except algae, remember, are unicellular. So that makes them protists. And there's 4 major groups of plants that we're going to talk about. And I really think of the notes, if you get this key idea right here, these 4 things, the notes will make much more sense to you. So make sure on 1, 2, 3, 4, make sure you get these things. Okay, so the first thing says Bryophyte, and that's going to be any plant that's non-vascular. So that means write in no leaves, no stems, no roots. So they don't have any of the vessels required to transport the water. And so the plant, you could probably guess, the plant has to be small. It's almost like carpet. And so an example of a bryophyte, in fact, the only example I know is moss. So bryophytes are moss, and they are, make sure you know, non-vascular when you come to class on Monday. Non-vascular means that it doesn't have roots, stems, or leaves, right? So they're really small, almost like carpet. Okay, Pteridophytes, and so the P in Pteridophytes is silent, and these are they're like in between. They're kind of like amphibians to animals. They're kind of water animals, kind of land animals. Okay, well these are kind of non-vascular because they don't have the seed plants, so they don't actually make seeds, but they're vascular. So they're a big stepping stone between bryophytes and gymnosperm, and that's Pteridophytes. And this is going to be a fern, so write in for me ferns. Fern, make sure you write that example in, is a pteridophyte, and they don't have seeds. Instead, they make spores. Bryophytes also make spores. The moss, they make spores. Okay, the next one is gymnosperms. And a gymnosperm is anything that has a cone. So gymnosperms, they have naked seeds. Naked seeds means that the seeds are not wrapped up in a fruit or a flower. They're in a cone. And so right beside gymnosperms, write cone for me, or a pine cone. And there's a picture. You can kind of see a pine cone. And that right there, that's what the seed looks like. The seed isn't covered. It's in a pine cone. Okay, and the last one is an angiosperm. And angiosperms are going to be anything that flower or fruit, that the seed is covered, angie means covering, the seed is covered in a flower or a fruit, so it's covered up. So remember, here's a way to remember this. Jim is a boy, and he runs around naked. His seeds are hanging out. And Angie is a sweet young lady, and she covers up her seeds with a fruit. Okay, so maybe that'll help you. If not, maybe you got a laugh out of it. Okay, so the next part of your notes is, it's all about the adaptations. And so out beside this, write for me structures that have helped plants survive. Structures that have helped plants, I spelled that wrong. Structures that have helped the plants survive. That have made plants more fit, that have made plants be able to adapt to their environment. And so the first one is the waxy cuticle. It's kind of like how you put lip gloss on your, or not really lip gloss, but chapstick on your lips. It holds the moisture in. And so that's what the cuticle does. The next thing is vascular tissues. The roots help absorb water. So yeah, Absolutely. The roots go down deep and they go wide so that they can get the most amount of water and survive. Write in for me that those roots can go deep into the soil. Into soil. Okay, there's a protective seed, and that's going to protect the seed is going to be protected, and that way it has a greater chance of getting planted and actually growing. Hey girl, what's up? But that helps the seed be able to actually have a greater chance of becoming a plant. And then flower and fruit development, we'll think about how much energy it must require to grow a fruit or a flower. And so, but what it does is it makes the plant more attractive so that pollinators like bumblebees will actually come and pick up the pollen and move them. And so the pollinators smell the flower and they see the pretty colors. And so these structures help moving to new areas and reproducing. Okay, so this next part is really just some terminology. And so there's the fruits. Okay, below the ground, anything below the ground is a root. Anything above the ground we call a shoot. So below the ground is roots, above the ground is shoots. And then apical meristem, that's the very tip of the roots. And so you can kind of see them right here. Oh, let's go back. There you go. You can kind of see them, the apical meristem. Have y'all ever seen the movie Twilight? Well, on Twilight, they're looking at onion roots. This is the very first one. They're looking at the onion roots under a microscope. Well, they're looking at the apical meristem cells doing mitosis. So think for a second, why would they be doing mitosis? Or why would we use that to look at mitosis? And the answer is because they are growing fast. The roots are growing fast. Okay, the next thing it says, they do have that cuticle, you know, that's the chapstick. Okay, they have stomata. Stomata are the openings on the underside of leaves. They're openings, so here's a leaf you can see right here. There's a little bitty hole on the underside and it lets in CO2 for photosynthesis. So openings on the leaves for bringing in CO2. Right for me out beside that CO2. Okay, and then most plants have xylem and phloem. Xylem are they're actually dead cells and they carry water up. So water goes up and then phloem carries the sugar down. So we can store the sugar in the roots, right? And so xylem carries water up, phloem carries sugar down. Xylem goes up, water goes down. And okay, so looking at your notes, this is all about bryophytes. And remember that bryophytes, right beside bryophytes, real big, non-vascular. When you see the word bryophyte, if you think non-vascular and moss, you're going to do good. That's all you really need to know. Okay, hepatophytes, which are these. Remember Hepat means liver. And so like hepatitis, the virus, these are called liverworts. It's a type of moss. Okay, the next one, Anthocerophyta, horn. Okay, so and you're going to be able to use these notes, so don't worry about it. And then Bryophyta, that's going to be your true moss that you see. There's the horns. There. Okay, these are very small in size, right, so they can absorb water. Okay, so you see in your notes where it says that the Gnetophyte generation is the dominant generation. Okay, out beside Gnetophyte, write in for me haploid. And remember that means it's like a sperm or an egg. It's only got the sperm or egg. So majority of the life is Gnetophyte. And so due to the presence of water, often in the environment, so it's water, so the little Gnetophyte can swim like a sperm. Possesses microphylls. And so there you can kind of see the raindrops and the spores moving. Possesses microphylls, and there's those little PHYLL means leaf. They possess structures similar to roots. So these are all about bryophytes. This is all moss. And so there's the sporophyte, but they possess structures similar to roots called rhizoids. Okay, the dependent sporophyte generation will be produced. So sporophyte is diploid. Out beside sporophyte, write the word diploid. And remember, it's majority haploid. Okay, so it's got, you can look at the picture here. It's got the foot for support. It's got the seta or the stalk for the rising part. It's got the capsule. So you see that at the top. And then the calyptera, this is a removable protective cap, so it comes off. And then the peristome is for discharging, so it's for shooting the spores away. So think about the benefit of if you use your peristome and shoot the spores away, then the little spore is going to land somewhere where there's not so much competition, so it pushes it away. Okay, they move water and other materials by that's passive transport, diffusion and osmosis, because there is no vascular tissue present. So they can't move water through the xylem and the phloem like, an apple tree can. Okay, ecological importance, what do? Well, it helps the soil absorb water is, I think, the major thing. But, okay, so they're a major food source. They're fuel source, and they also a CO2 bank, so they store the CO2, and they can also be used as a soil conditioner. Okay, so go ahead and flip over to the next part, and here we're talking about the vascular plants. So from here on out, it's vascular. The only one that's non-vascular is a bryophyte. Okay, so here's your it says 420 million years ago, so a long time ago, vascular plants evolved, and the benefit was that they could move the water around. The sporophyte, or the diploid, right, diploid again, besides sporophyte, is the dominant generation. Here's some adaptations. First, they have ligand in their cell wall, in addition to cellulose, which is stronger. Ligand is stronger. Okay, they have pectin to help reinforce weight-bearing cells, so they need to grow taller. Pectin is also stronger and a stickier sugar. Look at the roots. They have vascular tissues that they can go down and move the water around. They have roots, as shown here, instead of the rhizoid, because remember, rhizoid is in the moss. They have real leaves, or megaphylls. P-H-Y-L-L means leaf, remember. Reduced gametophyte generation, so less haploid and more diploid. That's what we're more diploid. Our life is diploid. The only thing haploid is the sperm or the egg. Okay, and there's your real leaves there. The two types of pteridophytes are Lycophytes and Pteridophyta. So that's the two different phylums. And you're just going to basically read, and I'm going to kind of summarize this real quick. But if you'll remember about the Pteridophytes, they are vascular. So right beside Pteridophytes, real big, they're going to be vascular and seedless. So that's what makes them different. Gymnosperms and angiosperms have seeds. So they're vascular, but they're seedless. Okay, so Lycophytes, you just want to know, there's not very many of them. And the ones that are around are tropical. Some are epiphytes, which means that they grow on top of trees. So epi means upon. So kind of like in the rainforest, they grow in the branches of trees. And so there's a picture there, an epiphyte growing in the branch of trees. Okay, and the next Pteridophyta is just showing you the three different classes, but the most important one I'm going to talk about is ferns. So put an asterisk by the ferns. And ferns, so I'll just show you, there's the first group, and then there's the second group. They're like horsetails. And then there's the ferns. But ferns, you want to know that they have a structure called a fronds, and that's just their little leaves, like how they're leaflets. they developed from fiddleheads. And you can kind of see, look how cute that is, that little fiddlehead. And then they have spores. You may have seen spores on the underneath of their leaves. And those are called Sori. So spores develop on the undersides called Sories. And so it kind of looks like the fern is sick if you ever see one in real life that has spores on it. But spores are for reproduction. It's going to release those spores and reproduce. Okay, so flip over with me to part 3. And anytime you need a break, take a break because this video is going to be long. Okay, gymnosperms right at the top. Naked seeds. And these are definitely vascular, right? So the only one that's non-vascular is the first one, the Bryophytes. Okay, so we're moving on we're moving on 300 million years ago, so we're getting closer. Still a really long time though. Adaptations, they actually have seeds. These are the first ones we talked about that have seeds. Greatly reduced gametophyte generation. So these are majority diploid or majority sporophyte. So write in for me, majority sporophyte. They got little bitty leaves, and guess what? Those little bitty leaves, they don't need much water. They do have a thick waxy cuticle. Okay, the leaves remain all year, so they're underline evergreen. I want you to know that gymnosperms are evergreen. Gymnosperms are evergreen. They have thick bark, so you can see the bark. And then they have, for reproduction, they have cones. And they have naked seeds inside them, right? Remember Jim ran around naked showing his seeds? Okay, so the wind carries these cones around. So there's some female cones. And there's a seed right there. So the wind carries it around. Okay, when you look at the gymnosperms, and the phylums really aren't that important to memorize because you're going to have your notes right in front of you. But most of them have cones, and they have the naked seeds. Okay, a Gnetophyta is the first one, and this is a ginkgo tree. And they look like a fan, like a Japanese fan to me, kind of. Okay, a Cycadophyta, you might have heard of a cicada before, possess large cones in the middle, and they palm out. A lot of times you use them in your yard for ornament, or like for decorations. Okay, Gnetophyta, these are going to be desert plants. So they're adapted to not very much water. And really all gymnosperms don't need as much water. Think about it. A cone or an apple, which one would need more water? Definitely the apple. So cones don't so much. And then you can see that picture. Okay, and then the Conifers, they have female cones and male cones. So there's your female, and the other one is the male. They have evergreen needles. We already said that. And they have thick, sappy bark. And that helps them resist fire. So they won't have as much fire. But it says thick, sticky sap to keep animals from eating it. So it helps them to be more resistant. Okay, turn to part 4. Okay, so this is all about angiosperms. So right at the top, real big, fruits and flowers. Because that's the big idea with angiosperms. They have a seed protected in a really smelly, wonderful, moist fruit or flower. Okay, so 200 million years ago. So these are the most advanced plants, are the angiosperms. They have flowers, it says. They produce seeds. They, of course, are vascular because the only one that's not vascular is the Bryophyte. And then Sporophyte is dominant. So they're all dominant Sporophytes except the Bryophytes. Okay, if you look at the parts of a flower, and you're probably going to need to pause it and make sure you know this, or even maybe sketch it on your paper. But they have vessel elements like xylem, which moves water. Write the word water above xylem. It says more water leads to larger leaves. So they have larger leaves, check this out, for photosynthesis. Okay, the flower is specialized for reproduction. And so the flower is mainly there to get that seed out, to get the seed protected, and so maybe a pollinator or some kind of animal is going to eat it. Okay, so the sepal, those are the green protective leaves down at the bottom, and I'm going to kind of draw on it to help you out there. So there's your sepal. The petals, of course, are the big, pretty orange things. Okay, the stamen, if you look, is made up of the anther and the filament. So that's all the stamen. The anther and the filament make up the stamen. Okay, the carpel, let me erase everything. Okay, so there's your carpel. It says that's the female part. So the stamen, you can remember that because it has the word men in it, is the men part. The carpel is the female part, and that's going to be all this. The stigma, the style, and the ovary, which has the ovule inside it. And so the female part, this is your female, has the stigma, style, ovary. The stamen has the anther and the filament, and this is the male part, and this is the female part. And so that's your flower. Okay, here's your fruit. It says it's a ripened ovary. So the fruit is actually a ripened ovary. If it's green, it's unripened, but you know that. Colored fruit means it's ripened. After fertilization, the ovary wall thickens to become pulp for the fruit. Here's the fruit structures here. Well, there's a picture of different fruits. So how are they dispersed? If they're kites, they're carried by the wind, like on the right. If they're burrs, you've had a burr like in your sock before, right? A little bitty, it looks like a little star, kind of. And then if it's edible, like a strawberry, the animal's going to eat it and digest it, and then put it in it, poop it out in a new area. And so the fruit types, they're simple. There's one ovary. Aggregate is one flower with several carpels, so you can see that. Multiple, you see that, and then the dry. Okay, so seedless fruit, so this is trickery, right? So if it doesn't have seeds, then it's harder to reproduce. Okay, there's your burr that might get stuck on your foot. Okay, double fertilization. That's going to increase your chances of survival. A zygote and an endosperm will be produced. The pollen tube is created. So you got one, which is a digger pollen. The other two enter through the microphyll, or the small pore. And then cotyledons. Okay, on the cotyledons, there is a monocot, which means one seed leaf. So underneath monocot, write one seed leaf. And then there's dicots, which are two seed leaves. So make sure you wrote that in, one seed leaf and two seed leaves. So on the angiosperms, there's monocots and dicots. So there's a monocot. And on the bottom, you can see a dicot. Okay, so types of angiosperms. So there's basal angiosperms, and those are the oldest. Magnaloids, these are transitional species. Monocots, okay, beside monocot, write for me grass. Okay, dicots, write for me, just an example, like an oak tree. And then the angiosperm, what does the plant use? It says the sources of food, they are for sources of food and medicine, so that's how we use them, and perfumes and decorations. And so I hope this was helpful. I know it was long. You may need to go back and rewatch some parts. See you soon.